Welcome to Housing for Huntsvillians, the podcast, a podcast about one couple's quest to eliminate homelessness in Huntsville by August 2026. Hello.
Hello.
Okay, so today I wanted to talk about an article that I read in the New York Magazine, about Jordan Neely, who is the Michael Jackson impersonator, who ex-Marine Daniel Penny choked to death on the New York subway system in May of last year. And I wanted to talk about it because it's a fantastic story. I mean, it's a horrible story, but it's very well written and well researched. Highly recommend you look it up. I tweeted a link to it a while ago, and I'm sure if you look up Jordan Neely, New York Magazine, you'll find it. It's on their intelligence or property. Anyway, but I think it makes some points about, Jordan was homeless he was experiencing homelessness at the time that he was killed. This was not a new state for him. And so I think it makes a bunch of really important points about homelessness and conservatorship. And conservatorship is something that we've talked about before, especially with Mike Tanner. Essentially, our goal here is to eliminate homelessness in Huntsville. And for most people experiencing homelessness, that can be done with more affordable housing. The number one cause of homelessness is a lack of affordable housing. So that's the main thing we're focused on as the main solution to homelessness, is to increase the affordability of housing and the amount of affordable housing.
I mean, conservatorship is like a second dimension of that's equally important, right?
So basically, we can eliminate homelessness with three prongs. The first prong is, and this is the biggest thing, is to make housing more affordable. There will be families, even with housing being more affordable, who still can't afford housing. Those families should receive cash assistance. And will still be an even smaller percentage of the population who, even with cash assistance and more affordable housing, cannot stay housed. And for those people, we believe conservatorship is the way to go. And so if you're new here or you don't remember, conservatorship is essentially a system whereby a city assigns a person a conservator. And that could be, you could think of it like a guardian, somebody who has kind of like a power of attorney situation, except instead of just being over that person's finances, it would be over whatever that person needs help with. And so we'll kind of talk, it'll become clearer kind of what we're talking about, I think, as we go through the story.
They've gotten a bad rap recently, mainly because of stuff in the news like Britney Spears, things like that.
Yeah, like any system, a system of conservatorship can be abused, but the alternative is worse.
Yeah, that's what I've picked up on. And I mean, also, a lot of people see one case and believe that that's what's happening on every level. And it's like, I remember even watching a movie a couple of years ago that was like basically fantasizing about like a person that did nothing but fraudulently obtain conservatorships and it's, you made me actually look back into it and like realize that it is not actually an evil thing. It's just occasionally gets abused like everything else.
I think I know what movie you're talking about, and that was a really good movie.
Peter Dinklage.
I don't remember.
Okay, we'll talk about that later. But
anyway, yeah. So yeah, no, I mean, anything where you're making decisions for other people can be problematic, but that doesn't mean you just let people deteriorate on the streets. And so, I mean, Jordan Neely is a perfect example of like what happens when you don't intervene. So I'm going to read like excerpts from the story and then just kind of give commentary. I don't know if this is the best way to do it, but so I'm going to do it. We're going to try it. So the story talks about an army of hundreds of outreach workers, often in their 20s and employed by small nonprofits contracted with the Department of Homeless Services, fans out into the city each day in teams, attempting to make contact with more than 3,000 homeless individuals who live on the streets and subways. The street smart record of BRC's encounters with him, this is Jordan Neely, is 71 entries long, dating back to 2017. It was 4:26 a.m. and Neely was at the 181st Street stop on the A. Mentally ill, the worker wrote in his notes. Okay, here my commentary is Americans will do absolutely anything to avoid building more homes. Like, New York City is sending out hundreds of outreach workers every single day. I don't know how much they're having to pay for all this. I'm sure the nonprofits are getting more than the workers are getting to make notes about people experiencing homelessness when you could just build homes for them. Anyway.
Yeah.
That was the year the Department of Homeless Services launched its top 50 list. Many of the people who live in the subways are well known by face and name to the police and MTA workers as well as to BRC. And the top 50 are among the thousands of street homeless most at risk of needing psychiatric intervention, according to the city's assessment, and who might qualify for and benefit from an involuntary stay at Bellevue or another psychiatric hospital. So this made me think about, in San Francisco, we have the same thing. I want to say it's like 15 people. Obviously, San Francisco has a much smaller population than New York, but I'm sure that's the same in Huntsville. It's probably like 5 people, but they would refer to them as frequent flyers. These are people who were well known to emergency workers, police. These are the kinds of people who need intervention. These are the kind of people who conservatorship is created for. They're not having a good time. They're not able to make good decisions for themselves. They're not able to care for themselves. Jordan Neely was definitely one of these people. Roughly half of people detained at Rikers suffer from some mental illness, so the jail, by default, functions as the largest psychiatric treatment center in the city.
Wow.
On June 21st, Jordan Neely, was on the J train where a worker noted feces and inappropriate clothing. 6 days later at the West 4th Street station, he punched a man in his 60s named Filman Castillo Baltazar in the face while he was looking at the train arrival monitor. That fall, BRC workers noted that Neely seemed confused and disoriented. So that's one instance of violence. Another quote, she turned her face away from Neely to break his stare, and that's when he hit her on the right side of her head above her eyebrow. Mitchell Tree fell backward, landing gently on a low pallet stacked with bags of sliced bread. Neely ran. Neely was beloved by the healthcare staff at Rikers. He was quiet and could frequently be found lying on his bed. In an environment that breeds conflict, paranoia, defensiveness, and violence, Neely was gentle, earnest, and stable. If he took his prescription meds and stayed off drugs, Neely could be stable. So we have multiple instances of violence. We have multiple instances of incarceration. And we have a situation in which Neely actually does better in incarceration than he did out on the streets, because that's a hallmark of severe mental illness, severe debilitating mental illness, is that these people are not able to care for themselves. They're not able. So they're not choosing to. They do not have it within them. Neely had vanished. On October 12th, he struck another woman in her 60s in front of the Bowery Ballroom, causing her to fall down and hit her head hard on the pavement.
Jeez.
So he was set to be incarcerated again, and then a judge put him through a prison diversion program. And this is where he would go to a mental health facility rather than, I think it was more like a halfway house rather than prison, named Harbor House. Harbor House's doors are not locked because it is not a prison and because Medicaid will not pay for psychiatric treatment within a prison setting. Neely left Harbor House on February 22nd, 2023, less than 2 weeks after entering. The reality for Jordan Neely and others like him is that he needed more intensive care than is available in any voluntary inpatient or outpatient program. Neely's last words, in addition to howling about his hunger and thirst, were, "I don't mind going to jail and getting life in prison."
It kind of sounds like that's what he wanted, honestly.
It certainly sounds like...
Or he wanted treatment, but
it sounds like he knew he shouldn't be out on the street. But again, he didn't have it in him to stay at Harbor House. Another quote, there should be some transition from Rikers that maybe has a secure element to it, but is also therapeutic. This is the person who met Neely during her stay at Rikers. Yes, there should be. It's called conservatorship. That's exactly what that is. That's exactly what it's created for. And that's exactly what Jordan should have had. That's what everyone in Jordan's situation in the United States should have access to, is a conservator to intervene and ensure that these people do not harm themselves and others.
It's kind of like one thing that I've heard you say in regards to it is it's like that conservatorship is not the inhumane thing. The inhumane thing is letting them stay out on the streets and suffer.
I would never have imagined it until I watched it, until I was in it in San Francisco. I would never have thought anything could be worse than being involuntarily committed. And then I saw what is worse than being involuntarily committed. And it's just self-destructing in the streets while people just watch you and don't help. It's worse for everyone. It's worse for the person experiencing it. It's worse for everyone who has to walk by it. And, you know, it's so frequent that you can't intervene. There's nothing to be done. And it's dehumanizing to everyone involved to just like let people self-destruct and let people commit violence and let people go in and out of jails and emergency rooms and psychiatric facilities for short stays. And then, oh, well, they get to choose. Well, they're not capable of choosing. I wish they were, but they're not. Yeah, and I agree we need to be careful about who, you know, and obviously when Jordan was on his meds, it sounds like he was fine. And so I'm not saying he needed to be like locked to a gurney for the rest of his life, but he did need to have someone make sure he was on his meds.
He needed some kind of intervention that wasn't available.
Yes.
And like, I'm in support of it now, but like when we first started talking about stuff, like I think I disagreed with it at that point because, yeah, honestly, hell to me sounds like being involuntarily like detained. But yeah, then you started describing things that you would run into with homelessness, and it's not a fun area, but yeah, I can totally see the need.
And it needs to be reevaluated on a regular basis. And I like the California model where the court appoints you an attorney who argues on your behalf. So there should be safeguards, and there are safeguards, but I don't know. I just think that it's, when we talk about mental health and homelessness, there's a lot of conflation of the two. And it's simply not true that every person who's homeless is suffering from mental illness. And it's not true that mental illness is the cause or a main cause of homelessness. But even if we have very affordable housing and even if we have cash assistance, there will be a small subset of the population who needs more help than that. And that's what conservatorship is for. So anyway, thank you so much for listening, and highly encourage you to read the whole article and to read up on conservatorship, and to we're also going to have a guest on the podcast coming up he's a lawyer who's going to go more into conservatorship as well. Check out Mike's talk if you haven't listened to that, Mike's interview where we talk about conservatorship. And yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah. See you guys next week.
Thank you for tuning in to Housing for Huntsvillians. This podcast is a project of Huntsville New Liberals. Sign up for our newsletter and RSVP to our monthly happy hour at huntsvillenewliberals.com.